Okay then, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Esther from the UNICEF team, so I'm going to run you through the briefing for this request for proposals today. Just the first thing to let you all know that we are recording this presentation. So hopefully that's okay with all of you. If not, maybe drop off the call, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so thanks very much for joining us. As I said, I'm Esther. I'm the project manager on this WASH innovation project based out of Supply Division in Copenhagen. On the call, we have the team from UNICEF, which includes James, who also works in innovation and supports me with the business models and the market agenda and heads up the team that I'm part of. We have Peter Harvey, who is the chief of the Water Supply and Education Centre here at Supply Division. We have Anne, the contracts manager for WASH. Henrietta, who's the WASH procurement specialist. We have Rob over in New York, who works for UNICEF on statistics and monitoring, and he has particular focus on water quality in terms of the joint monitoring programme measuring progress against the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we have Rick Johnson from the WHO, who is also part of the joint monitoring programme from their side. Just to let you know that you can post questions throughout the presentation in the chat box, and that we will respond to those at the end, as well as opening up microphones so that people can ask questions if they would like. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this project. This project started a few years ago as part of UNICEF's work, recognising that there are a number of children who die due to poor water quality, and that if we could have water quality tests that are faster and easier to use than what we're currently procuring, then we may be able to ensure that we can do a wider range of water quality testing and address these issues. To do this, the project that this request for proposals is part of set out to identify easy to use and cost efficient rapid detection tests that could give us fecal contamination in drinking waters. As a programme within UNICEF, we have a goal within the next 3 years that 60 million people should be reached with safe drinking water. And that means testing the water so that we know that it is safe. And in the target product profile that's part of this RFP, but has also been shared more widely prior to this, we lay out 3 particular use cases, of which we have the monitoring part, which is where Rob and Rick are currently working on the multi-indicator cluster surveys, which has a water quality testing element that enables us to track country progress against the SDGs. There's also potential, if we have better products, to be able to carry out more community-led water quality testing. And this will help us not only with behaviour change, but also as part of our emergency preparedness and emergency response, so that we can quickly and accurately test water sources to know that it is all working, it is all safe water. Then lastly, and potentially the biggest use case, is supporting our government partners to carry out regular surveillance and monitoring of waters. And this is where we think that there's a bigger use case, especially if we have the right product, because if governments carried out the level of water monitoring that they should be doing, then that's a massive potential market. Part of this project also has a markets element, and we hope that through this work we can open up new markets and territories for these rapid water quality testing products, which can then lead to more being available for UNICEF projects in the short term, but in the longer term to government partners and other actors in this space. So the objectives for this particular RFP, and these kind of have been set out in the target product profiles, of which there have been 3 versions since 2017. And the idea of the target product profile was to incentivize and encourage development in the space. And many of you have been updated on this as the program's evolved and developed. And as a result of that, we see that the goal of this RFP is to be able to contract products that actually meet those target product profile requirements, but also to better understand the products that are out there and the evidence side of the effectiveness, being sure that we have the evidence that supports that these products doing exactly what they say they do. But also, the RFP identifies hopes to identify suppliers who may not meet the evaluation criteria today, but have products and pipelines that mean that we will get there in the not too distant future. And UNICEF wants to understand this and see how we can help support the market to get those products to scale. So, as I mentioned, validation is quite a key part of this RFP. And what we're looking at are a few different ways to do this. The first is if a product has existing certificates with a validatory body relevant to drinking water. So the most common with this would be the EPA. But there are some validatory bodies that are a little bit peripheral to drinking waters, like the AOAC. And again, we would be any of the products that have those certificates and the study of evidence that goes with it, similar to drinking waters, would be one route to reaching the validatory evaluation criteria set out in the RFP. Another would be certificates from regulatory bodies that aren't directly related to drinking water, but do have an applicable use case that would be relevant to how UNICEF intends to use these products as laid out in the target product profiles. We also would like evidence to show that if neither of those apply, that a product has other approval routes. Now, this could be government approval or state approval. For example, the government of India maintains a list of products that they use for carrying out water quality testing, or we know of one supplier who has approval from California state for carrying out their water quality testing. Lastly, we've created for this RFP a validation route through the WHO, which would enable products to go through a lab protocol that would validate how they perform against set standards and parameters, which those of you who've been involved in this project, I've shared with you in the past, and I can make this easily available. All of this will be assessed by the Technical Advisory Committee on this project, as well as some of the UNICEF team. So as part of the RFP review and evaluation, the evidence submitted will be reviewed and checked by that team. And anyone who doesn't have evidence for the first three, if they're selected for field trial, would be eligible to go through the WHO protocol. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Rick, who's going to talk you through exactly how that will look. Rick, you should just be able to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, Esther. Thanks. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. So as Esther said, this is a joint project between UNICEF and WHO, and one of the WHO contributions is going to lead on the laboratory evaluation. And we've published a template protocol for that would be adapted to the specific requirements of the specific test assay. But basically, the idea is to evaluate about 15 to 20 assays under controlled conditions. This is, if you will, a first tranche, a first group of assays that we plan to evaluate. And in this first group, they would all be things that either measure E. coli or fecal coliforms directly or indirectly. And this would include some existing products that are commercially available today, but also some innovative products that are kind of in the pipeline through this TPP process. And we do expect that following completion of that first round of assays, we'd be able to make another round of of assessments, potentially looking at technologies that don't just measure E. coli or fecal coliforms, but do something else. But in this first round, there would be two phases of screening first, just to see if the assay works as it's supposed to under ideal conditions. That's lab waters spiked with laboratory E. coli, and it's a fairly small number of tests, which would be compared to a reference method, which will be the IDEX quantitrate system using color media. And then if the assay does well in that screening, it would proceed to a second phase where there would be a number of different types of challenges. So we would want to see how well the test does with non-target bacteria. Does it get any false positives? Or if you have E. coli and non-target bacteria, do you get suppression and a false negative? Some of the assays are claimed to work at different temperatures, say room temperature or 20 degrees or things like that. So if the manufacturer claims that, that would also be part of the challenge. And then this phase 2 would also investigate different water matrices, some groundwater, some surface water, some with turbidity or different levels of alkalinity or things like that. And also use wild E. coli taken from effluent from a wastewater treatment plant, because that can behave differently than laboratory E. coli. And in the second phase, there wouldn't be a pass or fail result, but just the recording of the performance against all of those different challenges. So we're in the process of identifying a laboratory. We would hope to have a contract with the laboratory to conduct the work by May, so that the field work or the laboratory work could take place over June, July, August. And then we'd be able to publish reports, in about September or October. So as with all things these days, it's a little bit contingent on when people are able to get back to their offices and laboratories to conduct the work. Esther, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Rick, for that. So, who should apply? Well, we would like, obviously, anybody who has a product that meets all the evaluation criteria laid out in the RFP documents, please do apply. However, we're also looking at products that meet the evaluation criteria, but may have different study evidence that would not necessarily be eligible for the WHO protocol. So this means it may not measure E. coli directly or indirectly, but already has certification. And an example of this would be through the EPA innovation process. Definitely looking for those kind of products to apply. Lastly, anybody who has a product that has a rapid test that may not quite be ready for evaluation and may not have the full study of evidence, but you feel that it addresses the full criteria in the target product profile. Now, this is because this is an innovation project, and we would like to hear from people in this space about what you're developing and how you might want to engage with UNICEF going forward. It does mean that the product may not qualify for a LTA, a contract at the end of it, but we are looking at assays that may test alternative proxies to fecal contamination and use non-traditional ways of measuring E. coli, and how these products could work with the use cases outlined in the target product profile. And when you come to apply for the RFP, you'll see that you can self-select your product under this novel work stream. And as I say, these products may not qualify for the LTAs at the end of it, but as UNICEF, we are interested in how we could work with these products going forward and how we can integrate them into our programs, especially if their indicator may not be E. coli, which is the sector standard. Okay, so what does the timeline look like? As you well know, the RFP is now open until the 26th of June. And we will close that, and it's all being done online through the UNGM intent system. And I appreciate that some of you have had challenges with this already. As much as possible, I've been trying to help, and they do have an online help system, which I'm not sure how useful it is, but just bear in mind this is a system that's not necessarily managed by supply division. We just operate through it. In July, the early July, we will review all of the proposals and make a selection as to which we would like to take forward to the sample evaluation stage. We will contact those suppliers, and we will have a call with those suppliers where we'll talk through timelines and get an understanding of where you guys are. We are very much aware of the current operating environment, so we will definitely take feedback and talk you through. Also, at that point, we will share the field protocol, so that it's clear and transparent what we'll be assessing during the sample evaluation and also the in-country field trials. In August, we'll receive samples to supply division, where we will carry out some reviews, and we will give feedback to suppliers, because we want this to be an iterative process where we can all make sure that the products work to the best of their ability. So we'll share feedback. And if there is any changes that need making, we'll give about 6 weeks between the sample evaluation and the field trials. And then we'll carry out the field trials in country for about 2 weeks. And these we will invite suppliers to come along for and carry out the training of the users on the products. And again, we will give feedback to suppliers after the field trial. If required, we can carry out a second in-country field trial. If not, at that point, we'll look at moving on to the LTA award. I just want to be really clear that given the current operating environment, we are aware that this timeline is flexible to a certain extent, and that we would ask you to keep us informed of any major changes or concerns from your side around this, so that we can make sure that we're doing the best of our ability to consider the current environment. So lastly, just to be clear for the question and answer process now, all questions and responses are going to be shared via the online system along with the recording of this briefing. We recommend in that sense that all questions and clarifications get submitted through the intent system, because we will publish answers to any questions publicly. So bear that in mind when you ask questions. We will of course maintain any anonymousness for certain questions or pieces of information, but we will try and share as much as we can openly. And just to be clear, we'll publish the results of this question and answer session by the 23rd of April online, and then we will take questions through the intent system and email up until the 8th of May, and then again we'll publish all responses by the 13th of May online. So yeah, any questions and clarifications can be submitted through the intent system, but if you really struggle with your NGM, please do let me know. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions, and just make sure that you guys can unmute your microphones if you would like to ask a question. So please, if there's any questions from the floor, do go ahead.
Esther, we have got one questions already in the chat box. It's a clarification whether all products need to go through WHO validation exercise that describe even if they have the certified AOAC/EPA certification.
They don't have to. They can choose to if they would like to, but it's not a requirement. Nice and simple question. I like that one. Any others, Henrietta?
No, not in the chat so far. So maybe we should just go to some of the questions that we have received already.
Mm-hmm.
We have one here saying that they don't think that they will meet all the mandatory requirements in the TPP, but would like to know whether we would still be interested to know where they are.
Yeah, so definitely. And if you feel that responding to the RFP is not the best way to do that, then please do email me and let me know. And we could maybe set up a call if there's no intention to submit under the RFP to talk that through. But there is still the option to respond to the RFP as a novel product and share exactly what you have, and we can review it that way as well.
Very well. Another question. Can we submit multiple water quality detection test products?
Yes, and we would encourage you to. If you have more than one product that you'd like to submit, do a submission for each one so that we can assess the technology involved for each. And then we'll review it accordingly. But yes, there's no limit on how many products you can respond with if you feel that they meet the requirements of the evaluation criteria.
And a bit along the same lines, do we submit an offer for one test, or could we also submit an offer for a kit where that one test is a part?
I think I'm going to refer to Peter at this stage and just get Peter to respond to that question, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks there. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the context of the question, but I think, like we said, with different products, then it's good to put one submission per product. If there are different permutations within a certain product, then I think that could be submitted as one, so long as there's clear information on how that one product can be used in different ways or different permutations. So that could be one kit that has different size vials within it, as was one related to the question, for example, then I think we would consider that as one submission, so long as there's clear information on the different utilizations or different permutations. Over.
Thanks. Do you want to add anything to that at all?
Sorry, were you? I didn't hear the beginning of your sentence there, Esther.
I was just wondering if you wanted to add anything to what Peter said about the different sizes of kits as separate products.
No, I think that's right. I mean, if it really is, you have some different size vials, for instance, if you have a presence-absence type of assay, I would include those as a single kit. If you really have different modular elements that are, in some sense, interchangeable, and you could use one or the other, then it might be a little bit different. So if, for instance, you had 3 different incubators that could be used, I think if we were looking at them, at least for the laboratory assessment, we wouldn't necessarily be able to validate each one of them separately. So for that, it would be good to just clearly lay out like which combinations of elements fit together to make a kit. And it might be that, multiple combinations are possible, but that we would only do an assessment on a smaller number of them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and again, also related to this question, whether you could offer one item or a kit, then what about the pricing? Should that be for one unit or could it be for the kit?
Anne, do you want to respond on the pricing for me?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think again, not 100% sure to understand the details, but I think if you have an individual unit as well as entire kit, we would be interested by both. If the individual kit is, for example, a consumable, which is part and later of the entire kit, of course, the individual price would be interested. So I would really recommend to put a breakdown in the offer, in the financial offer, on both elements and with a breakdown.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then a question on how many tests will UNICEF need for the lab testing and for the field testing?
So the estimates on that are about 150 tests for the sample evaluation and field testing by UNICEF, and about 150 tests for the lab process with WHO. And it's potentially that these could run concurrently. So if the product requires an incubator or a base unit of any kind, then the UNICEF testing would require 2 units in the field. And I think the lab testing was 3 units, but Rick, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly right. We'd like to have 3 separate units, just to see a little bit of the variability, if any, in the product performance.
Great. And on that, there is a bit of a time lag between them. For example, there is time between both rounds of UNICEF testing to produce more tests if required. I'm not sure about the lab testing. I would expect that they'd want everything in one go. So that would be 150 tests and 3 units in one go, whereas UNICEF would require 2 units and half the tests, and then a break, and then 2 units and half the tests.
Great. Question on where will the field test be conducted?
To be announced, but all parties selected for field tests will be, this will be communicated, as well as the field test protocol when they've been selected.
And also, when will the field test be conducted?
All being well, September, but currently that obviously can't be committed at this stage.
All right, great. We have got some questions here in the chat box, so we'll jump back to that.
Okay.
The first one is, do the systems need to be able to perform the full quantification in under 6 hours, or can the system provide the results slightly later if done automatically?
I'm going to answer this, but then I'm going to hand over to Rob on this one. So, if there's a quantified readout later, and then there's a presence absence earlier on, then the product, what we're asking is a product submits twice. Once as a presence absence test within whatever time frame it gives you a presence absence, and then again as a quantified test at the time frame that they would expect to get the fully quantified result. Did I explain that well enough, Rob?
Would certainly be evaluated on that basis. I think that there is value in having a quick presence absence with quantification later on. It will vary depending on the use case. So in some cases, I think that's less applicable perhaps if you need quantification in a short period of time. But I think it's definitely worth submitting that. I guess, thinking in the context of, for example, a household survey, you might imagine that you could provide results of the presence absence to the household, but then have full quantification, which would then inform sort of national government, which is something that may not need to be as immediate, let's say, in that context. But in the behaviour change, it may be more difficult if you're not able to detect risk levels within that 6-hour period. So I think that's certainly an interesting combination of an initial yes/no and then quantification later on. I think there's a related question in there about the number of samples that need to be done in parallel.
Yeah.
And I suspect that this relates both to the sort of lab and field testing. So, would it be possible to do the lab and field testing with a kit that does only 5 tests? But presumably for the RFP submission, the cost would need to be on the basis of 10 in parallel. Is that right, Esther?
Actually, it's the UNICEF RFP, it's 5 tests in a working day is what we're working to. So assuming that a working day is 6 hours, we want to get the results of 5 samples in 1 working day in the field. I think the WHO has a slightly different requirement. Rick?
Yeah, actually, I don't think our protocol gets into, how many tests could be applied in parallel. We're just looking at the results and then how it performs under different challenge conditions.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. I think maybe if we just want to take a pause, does anyone want to ask directly by unmuting a question? Nope. Yes. Franz? No. Okay, Henrietta, do you want to carry on with the questions?
Yeah. One here is, do you suggest that qPCR-based assays for E. coli are submitted as novel or submitted at all?
I would, Rob, can you answer? Or Peter, maybe.
You have certification along the lines that Esther was explaining. I think that there are some challenges with the equivalence between qPCR and culture-based ways of detecting E. coli. But if you have studies that demonstrate that equivalence, I think my sense is that it would be good to submit. So that's an easy answer. Whether or not it would be taken to field trial, etc., will depend on how it performs on the other evaluation criteria. But I think Rick is probably best placed to confirm that qPCR wouldn't be part of this first round of verification through that scheme, so that the onus would be on the supplier to have done studies already which demonstrate its performance.
Yeah, that's right. We're anticipating really looking mostly at culture-based assays on this first round, but do anticipate moving to qPCR or other types of assays in a future round.
Yeah. But yeah, I think as Rob said, please do submit. Especially if the only thing holding you back is the validatory requirement, then we as UNICEF are looking at how we can work with these products and move it forward. And we do hope to have a second protocol developed in the not too distant future so that we can validate these products as well. Okay, Henrietta.
Yeah. Are you interested in long-term monitoring as well as single measurement?
For this RFP, probably not. However, it depends on the technology, and I think this, this in situ monitoring is something that may change in time. But I think right now, we're not necessarily interested in that. Peter, is there anything you'd want to add on that?
No, I think you're right, Esther. It's obviously if it's a product that can only look at fluctuations over time against a base level, then that isn't quite what we're looking for right now. So if it's unable to do more than that, then it's probably not the right product. But certainly we'd be interested in information around such products as well, even if it doesn't fit directly into this RFP. Thanks.
Okay.
Henrietta.
Yeah.
Yes, I have one question. Hello. Regarding the on-field testing, what is the condition? Is there a kind of mobile lab or something like this, or is it really something that needs to be done immediately without only a little equipment, without any electricity, without any incubation time, or is it something that can be considered to have an access to electricity and an incubation, or not at all?
Thanks for the question. So in the target product profile and the evaluation table, there are some guidelines around all of this. If incubators are accepted, but they must have their own power source. So be this a car battery or a solar cell or a rechargeable battery, but that's within the parameters of the weight conditions. So it shouldn't make the kit too heavy to handle. So the field trial will be carried out in a situation that's similar to one of the use cases that UNICEF's looking at using. As I say, some of this is still to be defined based on the country selection, which is ongoing while the RFP is open. We will look at field trial will evaluate many of the ease of use and operating conditions, hence the emphasis on the validation in the lab alongside what the field trial itself. So whether or not it's the WHO protocol or some other way of validating lab performance, this then allows us to look in the field at more the ease of use and the operating conditions of the equipment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you in big part. And the other question is, if we are not able to supply the on-site, the field solution, can we offer our solution for the lab testing by the WHO?
That would be under this RFP, but I think I'd have to refer to Rick on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the laboratory validation, we have a number of commercially available products already that we're interested to assess. And as for innovative products, the TPP has been the main mechanism that we've become aware of those. So I think if it's not already a commercially available product, I'd suggest probably going through the UNICEF RFP so that we have all the information we would need to do to select a product for the lab assessment. But it is possible that different sets of products are chosen for the lab assessment and the field assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any more questions from?
Yeah, We have a couple of more, Esther. For the products in the pipeline that do not have a certification right now, will the evaluation process be the same or different? If different, is there anything we need to know?
So this would depend on the product mechanism. So if it's a mechanism that can be evaluated against the WHO protocol and there's no other certification, then and the product is chosen to go through to field trial, then we would use the WHO route. As I said, there are plans in our pipeline with the WHO to have a second protocol developed that would enable us to test some of these novel assays and approaches. So if a product puts itself through under a novel work stream, then we would review this as part of it and come back to the manufacturers and work in a slightly different way. And I think it would help us to know how we need to develop the validation process if we can know what kind of technologies we're looking at.
Yeah. Another question, where are the products to be delivered?
That will be communicated upon selection, but the first, the sample evaluations will be to Copenhagen. And as I said, the field trial location is still to be selected.
Then we have one saying, RFP kits disposal will be a responsibility of the lab, or how will it be handled?
Disposal should be considered as part of the process. So under the RFP, if we take products, oh, sorry, this is the kits. I'm getting myself. Disposal of the kits, we actually are looking at potentially loaning them. So we would only borrow any base units or kits that may be used under this project, depending on how it goes. But again, that could be negotiated and discussed depending on the supplier's specific needs or concerns.
And for the laboratory assessment, one of the tasks of the lab would be to safely dispose of any, say, reagents or spent materials. And as Esther said, if the hardware components were on loan, then they would be returned. But if they weren't on loan, then again, the laboratory would have the responsibility to safely dispose of them if we weren't going to be using them after the assessment.
Yeah, and there is a criteria around disposal of reagents and samples in the evaluation table. It'll only be assessed at field trial, but it is something to consider for products.
Any specifications related RFP kits packaging was considered?
There are some specifications in the evaluation criteria around types of material, durability, and those elements.
Good. Another question here. Are you also interested in having machine learning integrated with the rapid testing?
Yes, as long as it doesn't make it outside of the finance consideration for the products. So if this can be inbuilt, it's not something that we're specifically, it is something that we would be interested in.
And then I have so far a last question. For companies facing delays due to the COVID-19, will there be any additional time for them?
Yeah, so our hope is that most people can submit this expression, let me start that again. Our hope is that most people will be able to submit a proposal if they're interested, given the current operating environment. However, please do let me know if it's going to be a major consideration. If you were due to do some final lab testing or such forth that you can't do due to COVID, which may mean you don't have the evidence, again, please do let us know. And in the RFP submission, there is a text box for you to detail anything along these lines and lay out what it is that you may have been doing in this timeline that would have enabled you to meet all criteria in the target product profile, in the evaluation table. So we are aware that it's a very difficult time right now for manufacturers, and we do want to make it as smooth as possible while still adhering to the criteria that we've laid out. So my advice is to be as communicative as possible around this. And as I said, when it comes to field trialing and testing, we will speak to those selected, move forward and confirm the timeline to ensure that you are able to meet the timeline that we are talking about, because we do not know how long this is going to go on or how it's going to affect different countries. So just keep the lines of communication open there would be my advice.
Yeah, and we got a couple more questions coming in, so that's good. How about the mobile app as part of the submission along with test kits?
Again, added perks, as long as the key things for us are laid out in the evaluation criteria. Any added benefits are great, but the main things that will be assessed at this stage are performance in terms of technical performance of the ability to test water. Then when we go to field trial and sample evaluation, we will look more at how it operates and how a user interacts with it.
Good. And we're coming back to a question here about the size of the instruments. It is specified for 10 tests. So we assume 10 tests need to be done in parallel, or 5 tests like you said earlier, or is it okay to have, for instance, 2 instruments that can do 6 measurements each that fit in that size, or in the future can be re-engineered to have single instruments for 10 tests?
So the requirements were to be able to carry equipment to undertake 10 tests, but that within the time frame, the 6 hours, we should be able to get the results of 5 tests in the field. And this was just partly because sometimes when we go field sites, it's a long walk or a long way to travel, so it's being sure to be able to carry enough equipment. But yeah, the assumption is the 5 tests, but having enough space and equipment to be able to carry 10, with a view to maybe running some in parallel depending on the use cases. Any other questions? Wow. How many does this represent over a year? Great question. I wouldn't be able to give you that figure right now. That would be something I'd have to go and test, work out. Is how many tests per kit a year. We haven't done our breakdowns in that way. James, do you think we'd be able to?
Sorry, what's that, Esther? We're looking for a number of tests per year?
Per piece of equipment.
Okay. No, we haven't done a breakdown that way. We can talk to kind of volume of tests per year. Like if you can use the TPP use cases for a guide on an immediate year's worth of tests required, which we see dramatically increasing over time. I think it's something like 250,000 tests a year in year 1. It doubles by year 2 as we pick up traction and drive scale up once we have the products that we need. So we can look at total tests, and then you can work backwards depending on how many kits, how many tests per kit your products manage, and you could back into it that way perhaps if you were trying to work backwards into a projection starting. But yeah, you could use the total volume of tests overall.
I hope that answers that question. Any other questions at this stage? To ask more questions through the online system over the next 3 weeks or so. So away and read the RFP and then come back for any clarifications or questions that you might have. Okay, Henrietta, have we covered everything on the question?
I think so, yeah, I think so, we have.
Okay then, so I guess that's everything that you guys have got on your minds today. As I say, we will share the recording of this briefing through UNGM. A way for us to do it, and we will get answers to all of these questions written up and shared as well within the next week for all of you to take a look at and hopefully have some clearer answers to some of those questions. Yeah, So if that is everything from everyone, then I think we'll end it there. Peter, Anne, anything to add?
Don't think so.
No, nothing from my side. Thank you, Esther.
Great. Rob and Rick, all okay from your side?
All good here?
Great.
Likewise. Looking forward to seeing the submissions.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited. If anybody would like a copy of the WHO protocol and they don't already have it, please do drop me an email. I think most of you have my email meeting. I can share that with you to take a look at. Yeah, so if that's everything, I guess thank you very much for your time, and please do get in touch and let me know if there's any major issues with. If not, really look forward to seeing your submissions for this project and the amazing products that we're going to be able to fill for the future. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.